I think the reason why a lot of people are just giving up on jobs nowadays is because the economy is so much different than compared to what it was back in the day, back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, you know. And a lot of people in my generation, are just quitting on these jobs, losing these jobs on purpose because they simply don't see much benefit in keeping these jobs long term. Your parents most likely, when they got hired by a job and they got hired the old fashioned way, they most likely kept that job for a long time up until they retired. And, their position was maintained. And the cost of living at that time was very affordable. Now, the cost of living now is not much affordable. An average living today is not going to be sustainable. People of my generation, the generation after me, we got the short end of the stick when it comes to the cost of living, when it comes to inflation. And the boomer generation, they seem to not be able to comprehend the changes of the times that we're in. They don't seem to comprehend that jobs today are changing. That working a 15 per hour wage job is not going to be sustainable for a living. Because back in their day, they could make $3.25 an hour and still be able to live an average life. They were still able to afford to live in a house. The cost of living back then was much less. Wasn't expensive. It was affordable. It was sustainable. They were able to work a job that paid like the definition of minimum wage, $7 an hour. They were able to be happy making that much money an hour. But today, if you're making $9 or $10 an hour in 2023, you're not going to be able to live. You're not. You're not going to be able to live off of no $7.25 an hour, let alone 10, let alone 15. 15, you're barely scraping by. When I first started working after high school, I pretty much started out making, I believe, $8.99 an hour. And this is like back in 2014, right? But back in 2014, the economy was a little bit different. There was no such thing as inflation. There was no ridiculous high amounts of prices, right? There was no such thing as expensive cost of living. A lot of things were affordable within your budget, but it's simply not like that today. And the boomer generation thinks that we are able to get by just working a wage slave job, by working a 9 to 5, collecting a 401k plan, and we're set for life. That's what they believe. But in this modern era, we're not able to get by just making $15 an hour. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if you are living with other people, you're rooming together with other people in an apartment, 2 or 3 people, and you make 15 an hour, maybe you can make it work then, right? But if you're living by yourself, then you really have to step it up in terms of producing income. especially if you also have a family. You're taking care of children, you have a wife, and all that. Like, working a regular job is not going to cut it. For you, you may need to work 2 jobs just to stay afloat, just to maintain your living situation. And a lot of people nowadays have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to maintain a living. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to my situation, I have one roommate. My mother is also my other roommate. And we pretty much divide the rent 3 ways. And that's pretty much been the plan for over a year now, right? And I've had jobs where I was not making much, where I was just pretty much making the bare minimum. And I got myself a job, well, back in June. Been at this job for about 6 months now. And I can say, going forward, confidently say that I'm making better money than I ever made working at a job, right? Now, it's not saying a lot, but, my financial situation has definitely improved. I remember my financial situation last year. I was down bad. That's all I can say. I was down bad, man. It wasn't looking good back then. But I will say improvements have been made this year. Also when it comes to my credit as well. But I just want to give clarification as to why a lot of people are just quitting jobs. It shouldn't surprise you, And you'll have your boomer parents tell you to stick it out, to, work hard at these jobs. It's pointless, man. Your rent, your leasing company, right? The lease company of your apartments, right? Of your apartment complex. The leasing manager, they're raising the rent every year, right? And you may get a raise at your job. Yeah, you may get a raise, but then also the increase cost of living is in effect. You're getting a raise at your job, maybe $1 or $2 more, but it's still not going to be enough because your rent is also increasing. So you really can't enjoy and really save up money nowadays. It's very hard to build up a savings, But the economy, is increasing the cost of living. Way more than these jobs are giving out raises. And, efficient raises. Jobs today, they're probably just giving out a lousy 50 cents of a raise. 50 cents to $1. That's nothing. That type of raise is nothing. It's barely making a difference in your check, right? But these jobs are not keeping up in terms of paying us more to sustain a living. So essentially, with inflation in full effect, we're going from paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, surviving off of one check to another check to another check. And if our job were to fire us today, then we're screwed. We're screwed. How is that bill going to get paid? How is your car bill going to be paid off? How is your rent going to be covered? Now you have to figure something out. And, these jobs today they're just, these jobs today, they're phasing out. Like, they are really phasing out. And I think going forward, having an online job is going to be a lot more beneficial than going to a regular 9 to 5. Because I think the remote jobs are definitely paying more than your typical 9 to 5, you know, depending on what type of job you are applying for when it comes to a remote position. But the previous generation is not going to get it because they were able to live off of a 9 to 5. Okay? The cost of living back in 1960 was not very high compared to in 2023. Your parents or grandparents, they were able to live a comfortable life with just a 9 to 5 job, a typical wage slave job. They were able to. They were able to get a house and to maintain the house and pay for the mortgage. They were able to get a car. They were able to sustain a living with their income. Okay? That income of those years are not going to work today. It's just not. Making $10 an hour is not going to cut it in 2023. It's just not, and that's the truth. You know? The prices are going up, and I don't see them going down anytime soon. So, with our generation, we have to be a bit more crafty, and we have to come up with a better plan for ourselves, not the plan that our parents had for us since we were children. They try to force fed this outdated plan, this outdated way of living onto us, and it no longer works. It no longer has any benefit to us anymore. It worked for their generation because the economy was in a different place back then. It's not the same as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So if you're a millennial, Gen Z, you definitely get where I'm coming from. So with that being said, that's all I got to say about this topic. Thank y'all for watching. Give me your thoughts down below, and I'm out. Peace.